like to say a good evening, good morning, good midday to all of you, wherever you are. And so pleased that you're joining me here on this Space to Breathe session. In case you haven't attended before and you were expecting Vidyamala, she's actually taking 8 weeks off. She's halfway through that. And she's about to move where she was going to be into another place for a solitary. She's going to move into a yurt in the grounds of quite a large Buddhist centre not far from where she lives. And I've been helping her do that. So she's going to be camping, basically. I think it's called glamping in her case. It's got running water, but there's probably about all no electricity. And she's not taking any digital devices, which is pretty remarkable because she, likes to keep in touch with people, but she wants to get in touch with nature, do some drawing, thinking, and meditating, I think so. So this evening, I thought I'd just say a few words about how we think. A lot of my knowledge comes really from the Buddhist background. That's where I've mainly studied and practiced meditation and mindfulness. And I think we all know that when we sit down to clear our mind and focus on something like our breathing, which is often the one we mostly focus on, or it could be other people sending loving kindness. But what happens when you sit down, you get in touch with yourself, sometimes you feel relaxed. Oh, it's nice to have a space to breathe, become quiet. And you can enjoy that. You can sit there just enjoying that. And then you remember, I'm supposed to be focusing perhaps on my breathing. So you sort of start focusing on your breath. And then a little thought comes in, doesn't it? It's a bit like walking a puppy through the woods, or a dog, any dog really, but puppies are particularly good at this. You walk through the woods and you let them off the lead, and suddenly you thought they were well trained, and you just say heel, but then they go whoops over there, and then you stop and you have to go, come on back, and sometimes they don't come back. Come on back, and then they come back if they've got some training, and then you carry on walking, and the dog's quite happy, but they smell an enormous amount of things that we can't smell, and suddenly there's a smell over that way. Whoops, they've gone over that side of the path, and again you have to kind of stop, and but sometimes you just walk on, don't you, and the puppy's disappeared. And it's kind of an analogy for your mind in a way, although when the puppy disappears, it's like your mind's disappeared. What was originally you walking along a path is now the puppy that's running riot, and it could be chasing something. And so that's how often most of us experience our minds, particularly when we first start to learn mindfulness and meditation. And mindfulness, of course, is becoming aware that is what the mind's doing. It's actually just whizzing off, or sometimes sedately wandering off. And sometimes you come across a really good idea, don't you? You think, oh yeah, I could do that. I know, I've got my daughter coming tomorrow, I think, and I'm likely to think, what should I give her for supper? And then I like inventing recipes. So I think, oh, I could do something with lentils. And then you start proliferating all your ideas. And sometimes it's really creative, but actually your intention was to meditate. And, you can spend most of the day probably thinking. So we do have a lot of thoughts, and a lot of people suffer because the thoughts getting out of control. In Buddhism, there's a special word for this. It's called papancha in the language of Pali, or prapancha in Sanskrit. I don't know if you're interested in knowing that, but it's where your mind starts just proliferating ideas. So you start off with thinking about recipes, and my daughter coming, and then, for instance, you won't be thinking about my daughter, but you'll be thinking about something. And if I thought of giving you an example from my life, I might be thinking my daughter coming, and then I might be thinking, oh, she's coming with a family. I haven't got enough. Have I got enough beds? And you start thinking about it. Well, why don't I have enough beds? Well, that's because they don't come often enough to warrant more beds. And then you start getting into this thing where, well, they don't come very often, but I don't go and visit them very often. So then you kind of get into more and more slightly negative thoughts, and you could feel a bit upset because, you know, your daughter's not visiting often enough. And then you might be blaming yourself, you might be blaming them, and then you might be blaming the fact that your house isn't big enough, and it's the government's fault, and it's the pandemics that is about the worst thing that's happened, and everything's the pandemic's fault, and you know, basically human beings are stupid. You could get into that kind of frame of mind. Do you know what I mean? Nod if you can. I can only see a few of you, but some of you are nodding. Well, that is what's called propuntia. It's not just a proliferation of thoughts, because that usually happens all day long. It's like mental chatter, and it doesn't sort of bother us too much, I guess, otherwise we'd stop doing it. But this propuntia usually leads to more and more slightly negative thoughts. They're not very big negative thoughts, but they gradually build on one another until you could get to a point where you just feel really angry with someone or really frightened. You know, it may be another example would be that say your partner or your son or daughter or someone you love sends you a text and they're going to be home late, and you know they don't say any more, which is going to be home late, but that's a bit unusual for them. And then you start thinking, why didn't they say a bit more? They must be up to something, must be something bad or naughty. And you know, if it's a partner, you could end up with feeling that they're having an affair, for instance. You know, it's kind of, and then you've got all this in English it's called green for jealousy, isn't it? In Swedish it's called it's the only other language I can speak. It's called black sickness, which I think is a particularly good term, svartsjukdom. And so you end up feeling really jangled often and uncomfortable and so on. So this is something that can happen to us. I'm sure it's happened to most of us, most of you, not all the time, but it can happen from time to time, and particularly, you know, with regard to the suffering that's going on in the pandemic. You might just look at the news, you might see that there's another variant. That variant isn't in your country, but you start thinking it might be coming to this country because people are now allowed to fly into the country, and it just builds and builds and builds, and then you're back into kind of blaming, anxious, fearful sort of situation where you're suffering as a consequence. The pandemic has caused a different type of suffering. So mindfulness is this ability to catch yourself early enough. It's really difficult once you start getting a bit negative. You know, once you just notice that your mind is just being a bit, you know, stupid really. There's actually a translation. The translation for propuntia usually are something like conceptual proliferation. So you're not like imagining, you know, rice puddings or something, but you're having a conceptual building on one thing on top of another. And but there's another, I come across another a translation which I think actually describes it even better. It's called ludicrous dialogue. And you can have that even without getting negative at first, can't you? You can just have this ludicrous dialogue, that you thought you were going to get a camper van and then go on a tour of the whole world or something. You know? And you can just sort of think, well, how would I do that? What would that be like? And you have this, you just wasted 20 minutes suddenly having these sort of, you know, kind of fantasies about something, which is all right if that's what you wanted to do. But often it's sort of like your mind is, it's almost as though it's taken over by something that takes you on this ludicrous journey. And so I think this, for me, this word ludicrous dialogue is when I catch it, I think, here we go, starting on the ludicrous dialogue. Let's just, do I want to go on this journey? No, I don't think so. And so then you start, come back to your breathing. And it's not as easy as that, just the one off. So you have to just notice there's something in you that wants some sort of distraction, perhaps. or something's happened that's triggered you in some way. And so you have to keep coming back, don't you? And just sort of allowing yourself to settle again. And it's like the puppy then, it just runs off a bit. And, you know, usually puppies will quieten down a little bit if, well, maybe not puppies, when they get a bit older and they get a bit tired, and carry on walking with you. And there's not that much interesting there. So I thought we'd do a meditation this evening, and just allow yourself to watch what your mind does. You know, just see if it's happy, we'll use the breathing to anchor ourselves in the present moment and in our body. And just after we've done that for about 5 minutes or something, we just allow ourselves to be aware of the breathing, but just aware of when thoughts come in. And you could even decide, you might use another conceptual method, just thinking that was a ludicrous thought, and you let it go. But that's the only thinking you need to do. Like, you could kind of categorize it, or that was a creative thought. I'll come back to that later after the meditation. That would be a useful thing to do. So that's a kind of, it's quite a useful way of getting to know yourself and your thoughts coming a bit more closer together. Okay, so if you like to settle down, you don't need to look at the screen. You can leave the screen on or turn it off. And just, if you want to shut down your senses, probably maybe good to keep your audio sense open. Otherwise, I can't lead you through it, although you can stop listening if you're doing well enough on your own. And it may be nice to just realize that I think there are at least 48 of us. There may be more listening through YouTube. We're all in this community of people around the world. I think all across the northern hemisphere of the world, at least, and different time zones. And we're all sitting together right at this moment, just now. And we're settling our body, beginning to feel the sensations in our body. Allowing the body to settle. And maybe just being aware that we're being held down, pushed down, pulled down by this force of gravity holding us. We don't need to fight against it. We can let go kind of into it without falling off our chair, just balanced. And you can also use your imagination if you want to. You can be breathing. You can imagine, if you want. I mentioned walking through the woods with a puppy. You could be see yourself walking through the woods if you wanted to, with or without a puppy or a dog. And it's almost like each step represents part of the in and out breath. If you're visually inclined and you like to use images, you could think of the sea, kind of small waves lapping on the shore, or even big waves spreading up the shore, maybe with the in-breath, and then receding, being sucked back into the ocean with the out-breath. Or if you're not interested so much in the visual effects, just you could stay with the sensual, kinesthetic sense, the feeling sense. Just letting yourself feel your body breathing. And then you're on this kind of journey for the next 15 minutes, which is a bit like following a path. And every now and again, something will pull you off this kind of comfortable path you're on. Maybe it's more interesting. It's usually something's more interesting than staying with the sensations of breathing. And when you notice your mind does wander, and just notice if it's kind of a ludicrous wandering. Is it something that's just neutral? It could be something quite neutral. It could be something quite creative. You could call that positive if you like. Or it might be something sort of mildly irritable. You're kind of a bit fed up with something or someone. And that kind of more negative thinking. Doesn't matter which one you're having. The important thing is you notice it. You're not being judgmental about, keep thinking about how irritated I am with that person. I'm a bad person. So you're not doing anything like that. You're just noticing, oh yeah, I keep thinking about that person. Okay, I'll just carry on breathing. Sometimes you do have emotionally charged thoughts. They're difficult to let go of, and just in which case you may have to be with that irritating person, breathing with them, and just recognize that breathing too. If it's not a person, you can just be aware of your own breathing. And just reminding yourself, you're training your mind to relax, to become quiet, calm, opening up. Maybe opening up to something much more interesting, maybe even more mysterious than thoughts. What's it like to be aware, awake, and letting go of our thoughts, not participating in a process of thinking about something? You just might sometimes have this feeling of letting go a bit more when that happens. When you can let go of the thoughts, it's as though you settle a little more. And it can also be that it's energizing. It's not always about doing nothing, sitting quietly. It can be quite energizing. You can feel the energies in your body flowing, maybe flowing a bit more freely. So you feel more alive. And it's good to have this sense of mystery, like you do not really know what's going to happen. Things may have happened before, but there's no guaranteeing they're going to happen today. It's just having this sense, if I can let go of the thinking, something new that's non-conceptual will begin to arise. An experience, a non-conceptual experience arising. And even if it does, try not to think, oh, that's interesting. Here I'm having a non-conceptual experience, which is a conceptual reasoning. So just when that happens, just notice there'll be a thought attached to that, and then release, settle, open, and see what happens. Maybe nothing happens. Don't worry. It's kind of just exploring. I'm going to stop talking now and leave you to just practice on your own. I might, after a few minutes, just suggest, just ask you where you are to remind you in case you got lost. So just letting go, settling, opening up to something, some new experience, maybe. So just where are you now? What's happening? How is your breathing at the moment? Is it soft, smooth, or ragged, short, a bit long? Does it feel as though it's relaxing you? If you have any breathing problems and it's difficult focusing on your breathing, then just see if you can find another sensation in your body. Sometimes you can find that in the back, which is kind of a long way from your organs that are orientated towards the front of you. So you can sometimes, it's called being aware of your back breathing, but you can leave the breathing bit out if you want. You can feel your back moving because it flexes slightly, expands and retracts slightly. It does this with your breathing, but if you're focusing on sensations in your back, it may help if you have a difficulty with breathing or focusing on your breath. Or if you're just finding being aware of your breathing not that interesting, like your mind's just saying, oh no, not that again, oh, I can't do this, you could try something harder. Surprisingly, just you could also try to feel your back moving, the muscles, back, lower back, just, well, the middle of the back, just below the where the ribs join the spine, starts to flex, starts to move outwards with the in-breath and inwards with the out-breath. So let's just, for the last few minutes, take the opportunity to recognize we're having a shared experience with another 48 or more people. We're all doing something very, very similar. And there are people as far apart around the world as California, and I don't think there's anyone in Europe, but certainly here in the UK, a lot of people. And presumably we're all here together because we like practicing together. So let's take a few moments to enjoy that, just to have a sense we're kind of exploring something together. And so there's a collective shared experience going on, which we can open. I don't even know what I'm talking about really, but we can open up to it. This sort of having a sense we're all breathing together, we're breathing in together, we're breathing out together. Our minds are wandering here and there, but we're happily just calmly bringing them back, settling. And so we're all just quietly together, breathing. And it can bring with it a kind of sense of joy, of love, kindness, compassion for anyone who's having suffering, difficulties. So we're beaming love, empathy towards one another. So we're lifting, supporting one another. Just breathing with that, even if it's just an idea, breathing with that idea of supporting one another in this space. And just coming to the end of the meditation, just reflect on what was happening for you. You might have noticed that you were being judgmental sometimes, and sometimes you just felt a bit sleepy, you wandered off comfortably. And it's always good to reflect after doing a mindfulness practice on what happened. And if that's, just to help you in your next practice to look out for something that you would have preferred didn't happen, your mind wandered off. And if there was any kind of sense of this propuncture, this ludicrous dialogue, or this conceptual proliferation that can lead to overwhelm. Hopefully no one felt overwhelmed this evening, but you might have a sense of the mind thinking in ordinary day life, and you can stop it. And if you stop it in time, you reduce the suffering. So you can begin to re-engage with the world through the senses. And if you feel like a little stretch, you can do that. Move around. And if you feel like it, you could just share with the rest of us any experience you had. I'll try and read it out. I have to warn you, I do suffer from a certain degree of dyslexia. And if I get people's names wrong or misread something, don't worry about it. It's just me and my little disability. So that's from Olivia. That was very relaxing and skillfully led. Thank you. Thank you. Mark says, I felt a real sense of being settled as my experience unfolded. Lovely practice. Thanks, Anna. Thank you. Love that. That's Elaine from the Netherlands. So Suzanne was a bit late from Vancouver. It's jumping around there. I have to. So Lynn said, thanks, slowed my heart rate down beautifully on my imaginary walk. That's nice. And so Anna, where's Anna gone? I had tipped into overwhelm today, so that was a good practice. Sorry, I've lost you, Anna. Go back and find you. That was a good practice for this evening. Thank you. It took a while, but I did get to a calm place, which I needed. That was Miriam. And Gerda, thank you from Germany. Hazel, my thinking slowed down. Tracy, very comforting and relaxing. Donna, thoughts coming and going. Much gratitude, kindness to all. Very relaxing and lovely sense of us being all together. Kate. It was very peaceful. And Sarah. And someone's wishing me to have a lovely time with my daughter. I'm sure I will. And my grandchildren. Thanks for the practice. It was interesting to identify the different types of thoughts. So thank you, Joanna. At this time, my wandering mind was more joyful, a new experience. Thanks. Sophia, enjoyed your words, remembering the connection of the group. I learned to love my ludicrous dialogue. I witnessed some ludicrousness and let it pass on by. Rather reassuring, thank you. That was from Katie and from Juanita, Larissa. The sense of community and connection always improves, deepens my practice. Very solid sense of togetherness without the effort it usually takes. Many thanks. Once again, practicing live with others is very nourishing. Nicola, very relaxing. Thanks to everyone. Hilary, loving the sense of the Sangha meditating together. Denise, lovely and peaceful imaginary walk along the beach. Thank you. So thank you everyone for sharing that. It's lovely being with you this week, and I should be back next week. I'm not planning on going anywhere, so I'll see you again. And then I think it's in about 5 weeks Vidyamar will be back. So have a very good week, and notice if you're getting into not just ludicrous dialogue, but the sort of dialogue that kind of you can see is going to take you to places you don't really want to go to, and then you practice just letting go of it and stopping and thinking of something more joyful. And it all comes with mindfulness. So I wish you well, and good evening, good morning, and have a nice day, have a nice sleep wherever you are. Bye-bye.